Hi everyone and welcome to the third game of round 7 of the Star City Games Invitational Qualifier Legacy event held in Doncaster. It's 1-1 between Rob Catton and Amar Dattani. Very well could be playing for top 8 here. Both players have 4 wins and a draw out of their 6 rounds, so it's basically a win and in situation.
Yeah, you'd expect that to be the case. Wondering if Rob also has Geist of St. Draft, or if he doesn't, because that would be a deciding factor, I think, after Sideboard. If he doesn't have them, I think Amar's massively favourite in this third game.
Yeah. It's not like the old standard event where people have got phantasmal images everywhere to deal with Geist of St. Draft. He's pretty much unstoppable in the...
Yeah, they've got Supreme Verdict and discard spells and engineered explosives. That's basically their outs.
Yeah.
And obviously blocking with a Snapcaster Mage.
Yep, so what have we got there for Amar? He's got 2 lands, Ponder. That looks like Zealous Persecution to me.
Yep, they do play that in the board sometimes.
And then we've got Swords to Plowshares, Engineered Explosives, and I think a Stoneforge Mystic over there.
It's a very reactive hand, I would say. I mean, the Stoneforge is his only real play that adds pressure.
Yeah, and it's gone now thanks to the Inquisition, so yeah, we're probably going to look at that Ponder being played turn 1 here by Amar. And this time no issues with it. Yeah, we were talking towards the end of game 2 about sometimes having to fight the tendencies to be a good player, because as we saw in the first game, it's like very well Amar might have been trying to protect his hand from Vendilion Click somewhat by not brainstorming with Jace pre-combat, but if he had, we would have seen a Geist with a Umezawa's Jitte on it. So do you think that a lot of the time that can be an issue for some players?
It just goes to show that you have to, despite the play 90% of the time being correct and waiting, you have to really think about each play in its individual vacuum. As Amar making a little bit of a mistake with his pen twirling.
Do you think that it's a I suppose one of the ways that it could be described is having a ceiling to your game, that there are a lot of players who can play within that sort of 90% role. They'll make the decision that would appear to be a good decision all the time, but the very best players can find the situation where that 10% is the best.
Yeah, it just comes through a lot through discipline, where you're not forcing yourself into making what's perceived the correct play all the time. I mean, you could even describe it as the old cliche of thinking outside the box.
Heard that one a few times. Rob cracking a fetch land here, so shuffling away some of that Ponder at least.
I mean, the other side to that is if you're making plays on the assumption your opponent's going to make the correct play as well, that can get you into trouble a lot of the time as well. Just a bit more of a difficult one to play around.
I think generally at a higher level event, most of the time playing as if your opponent's going to make the correct play, certainly in the later rounds, is probably the best way to go about it. But I've certainly seen, from the Magic world, I've certainly seen times where players have somehow won by making the wrong play, essentially.
And then you've got to try and figure out whether that wrong play was that 10% of the time where the wrong play was the correct play, and it gets all a bit confusing.
Yeah, it's why we love this game so much. There's so many subjective decisions, aren't there?
It just generally goes down to the point is if you think your play's through, don't get stuck in that muscle memory play where from your testing it's always been the correct play, because at one time it might not be. And you've got plenty of time to actually think. I mean, if you look at these two players, they're playing a control mirror, they're moving particularly fast, but they are taking that little bit of time over the decisions.
And there's a Glacial Fortress from Amar.
Yeah, that's to do with back to basics, believe it or not. It's a bit of protection against that if anyone decides to play it. That's where it originally found its way into the list, and then at the end of the day it's going to be coming in untapped 90% of the time, so
it'll be choke protection, isn't it?
And choke as well, yeah. Choke is the more played.
Yep, so pretty stacked hand there from Rob. What do you think we're going to be seeing Amar taking here? Well, you don't get a chance to answer because he takes the Snapcaster Mage.
That's just because it's a source of card advantage, really.
the sword isn't going to do him too much damage in the short term anyway, because Rob's going to need to find 2 land for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit slow for Rob to go tap 3, make a sword, untap, equip the sword, and Amar not to have a response at that point.
So let's see if Amar does have something to do here. Engineered explosives for naught. So
yeah, he's not gonna crack that unless he has to. He's gonna wait on Rob to flash back the lingering souls.
yeah, I think Rob's also going to. Oh, he is actually going aggro with it.
I think Rob's quite happy to see that there. Like he can just cast a Jace here without worrying about counterspell as well.
He's going for the lingering souls. So.
Have we seen any Force of Wills in games 2 and 3 from these 2 players yet?
I am honestly not sure.
I don't believe we have. Perhaps they've sideboarded them out with the card disadvantage being very important.
I mean, we also saw Amar make the. We did see Amar brainstorm in game 2 in response to that Stoneforge Mystic, so maybe he does have Force of Will. It doesn't seem to make a huge amount of sense to. It doesn't seem to make a huge amount of sense to brainstorm there if you've got no possible follow-up play.
Yeah, possibly they've kept them in then. I mean, they're fine when you're fighting over Jace on turn 4, whether you're the player casting Jace or whether you're the player trying to protect Jace, they're fine. However, removing a card from your hand is a massive, massive cost.
It looks like Amar's just brainstormed there with no access to a fetch, but... And, oof, that's Geist of Saint Traft. And
he has Caracas to protect it as well if he gets to untap.
Did it look like Rob tapped his mana a bit wrong there? I think that was the case, because we know Rob's got a counterspell in his hand. So yeah, I think that was a case he only left up Underground Sea and Scrubland, so he couldn't play that counterspell that was in his hand.
Yeah, that's quite unfortunate. I mean, I suppose he can be thankful that he was a Geist and maybe not a Jace the Mind Sculptor.
In either way, it looks like that could be a pretty big mistake on Rob's
that
behalf.
could cost him the game. At least he can interact in some level with the Geist of Saint Traft. I mean, less so because of Caracas, but that is tying up a lot of Amar's mana every turn.
Yeah.
And with the counterspell still in Rob's hand, I'm not sure he can actually bounce the Geist.
Really depends what Amar's got here. If he has a Swords to Plowshares or something along those lines, this could be devastating for Rob. Incoming Geist.
Let's see if Rob decides to block it here.
I think one of the things that's very important at this point is that Rob doesn't... If Rob knows what's happened, and I believe he does at this point because he'll have seen his lands, it's very important that Rob composes himself and doesn't tilt in this situation.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to do when you make a mistake in a game.
Especially one where it's a fairly, you know, the difference between not top 8ing and top 8ing here, certainly monetarily wise, is pretty large. And it looks like Amar has a Swords for one of those spirits.
The unfortunate thing for Rob, if he does move in with a counterspell here, then Amar can just bounce the Geist and then replay it.
Yep. So that is counterspell, and oh, does Amar have something back? Oh, that's Zealous Persecution, which we do know that Amar had, but that is pretty brutal.
Yeah, it's going to give Amar's attack 2 extra damage as well. Well, 1 extra damage because the Geist is blocked.
And Rob's going to Swords the Angel in response to the Zealous Persecution. Yeah, this is looking pretty ghastly for Rob at this point.
He's just gushed a load of cards there for no real benefit.
I do also like the way Amar played that. We know he had the Zealous Persecution and the Swords, but instead of going immediately for the Zealous Persecution, he baited out the counterspell from Rob before going for the complete blowout.
Yep, it was very well played, that.
And I think that this Geist is going to go more than likely going to go the entire way unless Rob can produce a Supreme Verdict or an Engineered Explosives.
So those sorcery speed answers aren't going to really do much because Amar can just use the Caracas to bounce his guy.
Yep. Amar's also on a lot of life at the moment thanks to
He's got
Russ.
such a life buffer, it's It's going to be very hard for Rob to come back into this game.
Inquisition, what do you got? Supreme Verdict, Swords to Plowshares. So 6 more. Puts Rob to 4. He's got 1 turn to find an answer to that Geist. Amar just putting some... is Amar just going to go for the full air elemental here, or is he just going to make 2 guys?
I imagine he's just going to make 2 guys.
Yeah.
He can just represent so much with the lands islands up there.
Yep. And Rob is looking at his top card, and it's not good enough. So, yep, that little bit of a tapping mistake cost Rob pretty dearly there, and he is going to unfortunately miss out on top 8 here, whereas Amar has got to wait and see how things go. So thanks very much, guys. We will move on very shortly to the top 8.